I would like to introduce our speaker tonight, Jeremy Arp, who's the Executive Director for the NSW Washington chapter. And as far as I know right now, also partly responsible for the Hawaii chapter, if that is still the case. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us and spending your evening with us tonight and sharing all of your knowledge about the Washington State licensing process. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Claudia, and thanks, Ryan. University of Washington Tacoma has asked me to speak on the licensing process. A few years. I think this is the fifth year in a row, which is wonderful. Again, my name is Jeremy Arp. I serve as the executive director of NASW Washington State Chapter. My pronouns are he, him. I'm going to go through and provide kind of an overview of licensure in Washington State, and then talk about the requirements and resources. Also, we'll be talking a little bit about recent legislative changes, that is, changes in state law that affect licensing and rule changes. And we'll get to that towards the end. I think we have a lot of material to pack into 1 hour's time. So without further ado, as you learned in school, hopefully, either in your undergrad or graduate studies in social work is a licensable activity in Washington State. There's your legislature meets in bienniums. It's every for 2 year periods. They get good ideas from the public. They get good ideas from associations, court decisions, etc., and they decide to pass laws to regulate different aspects of professional life and society in general. In Washington, the law that you're concerned about for social work licensure is 18225 of the Revised Code of Washington, or RCW. When a law is passed, rules are promulgated by the agency, so the agency that is administering the law can actually have rules to follow that are within the law to get the program off the ground and running. And so in Washington, the rules are Washington Administrative Code, and that would be Chapter 246809. Other items that affect social work licensure in particular would be DOH, or Department of Health, policy statements and governor's proclamations. Those played a huge role during the public health emergency, otherwise known as the COVID pandemic, allowing people to practice without seeking continuing education, authorizing a lot of telehealth and work over state lines and emergency volunteer roles. So that's something you, as a social worker that's seeking licensure, would always want to pay attention to, those changes in law. And I'll show you how to follow those changes at the end of the presentation. The objectives for tonight is just to define the 4 categories of social work licensure in Washington State, also to identify the steps to apply for social work licensure and define approved supervision in Washington State, as well as review continuing education requirements. What I don't have the ability to do is to load a dummy application into the SAW system or the state of Washington's online access system. So this will be more of a conceptual approach to licensure, but I'll refer to the website at the end of the presentation too, to show you where to find the applications for licensure. The categories of licensure are defined in 2 general areas. The Department of Health administers social work licensure in Washington. They are the rulemaking. They're the rulemaking authority, but they're also the licensing authority currently. There's 2 levels of licensure. If you think about it, as an associate level, that's where you're working towards your full credential. If you go for the LASW, that's the licensed advanced social worker. That's the full credential. You'd have to work as an associate in that category, a licensed social work associate and advanced. You'll see it abbreviated as LSWAA for the associate level, working towards the full credential of licensed advanced social worker, or LASW. The next category of licensure would be the independent clinical licensure. Your final destination would be the licensed independent clinical social worker, full credential, and you'd have to work under supervision as a licensed social work associate in independent clinical. You also see that abbreviated as LICSWA, which is a little confusing, but just know that you have to be an associate first before you can get the full credential. And you'll kind of hopefully see the process here as we outline it. First off, in RCW 1822510, that's the state law in Washington with definitions for social work. Advanced social work means the application of social work theory and methods, including emotional and biopsychosocial assessment, psychotherapy, under the supervision of a licensed independent clinical social worker or another mental health practitioner, such as a psychiatrist, psychologist, psychiatric advanced registered nurse practitioner, psychiatric nurse, or other mental health professionals as defined by rules adopted by the Secretary of Department of Health. Case management, consultation, advocacy, counseling, or community organization. So again, advanced social work, if you go back a slide, would be what is covered under the LSWAA and the LASW. So you note that psychotherapy under the supervision of a licensed independent clinical social worker or another independently licensed profession would be the domain of that. So getting further into the definitions, you have 1822510 defines independent clinical social work means the diagnosis and treatment of emotional and mental disorders based on knowledge of human development, the causation and treatment of psychopathology, psychotherapeutic treatment practices, and social work practice as defined in the prior definition for advanced social work. So treatment modalities include, but are not limited to, diagnosis and treatment of individuals, couples, families, groups, or organizations. So again, independent clinical social work, once you reach the LICSW, you can practice without supervision. All other levels need to practice under supervision when they're doing psychotherapy specifically. 18225 005 states that LASWs and LICSWs represent different specializations within the social work profession, with each license signifying the highest degree of licensure as it pertains to each specialty. Practitioners in each specialty exercise independent judgment and operate independently within their area of practice. For the purposes of job classification, the statute was written, or the law was written, so that LASWs and LICSWs are licensed, would be both considered the top tier of licensure for the profession. That said, you'll see that LASWs, again, working with if an LASW is to do psychotherapy, they have to work under supervision, whereas an LICSW is a licensed independent clinical social worker does not have to practice under supervision when they're doing psychotherapy. So that's getting to the next definition when we talk about associate licensure. 1822510 means a pre-licensure candidate. So that is the pre-full licensure candidate who's working towards full licensure in their profession. They must have a graduate degree in a mental health field under RCW 18225.090 and is gaining the approved supervision, supervised work experience, and continuing education necessary to become a licensed independent clinical social worker, a licensed advanced social worker, or somebody else in the same chapter 18. Associate licensure is the first step in becoming licensed. We stress that because you might hear from some of your supervisors that they didn't have to be an associate licensee. That was once true, that some people would practice without becoming an associate licensee. They'd gain their hours of experience, document those hours, and turn them in. Now the state requires you to become an associate licensee before you can apply for a full license. That is the LASW or LICSW. For all licensees, there's certain requirements outlined in statute. Completion of a master's or doctoral social work educational program accredited by CSWE. Just a real quick note on this one. CSWE accredits master's and bachelor's programs. They accredit some doctoral social work programs. There was a pilot going on at one point, but just note that there's language that changed in statute that allows for doctorates that were not accredited by CSWE to be accepted as long as there's a master's program underneath it. Completed application that is signed and dated is also required for all associate licensees. So you must have an application that outlines that you're applying to become one of the two license levels. The application and initial licensure fee is sent to the Department of Health, and the fee schedule is listed in statute and changes every couple of years. Completed out-of-state verification forms sent directly from each state. The out-of-state verification forms are for those folks that have been licensed in other professions. Perhaps you are from a state that licensed bachelor's social workers, or if you're moving to Washington and you had an LMSW, say in New Mexico or Arizona, or Idaho, and you wanted to go for your LICSW here, you'd have to fill out that verification form. Same if you were in any licensed profession, you'd need to disclose that to Department of Health. You'd also have to get your official transcript sent directly to the Department of Health from the School of Social Work where the degree was obtained. Typically, you'd reach out to your registrar's office to make sure that your official copy of your transcripts are sent over. That's usually, you're typically able to do that electronically as well. So it's not like a letter sent to the school anymore. So a licensed associate, that's somebody that has filled out an application with the Department of Health and declared that they're going to go for a full license, begins accruing the necessary hours of supervised employment, approved supervision, and continuing education necessary to apply for full licensure. It says within the maximum 7-year period. That has actually changed. It used to be totals of 7 years. Now it is indefinite. So associate licenses are valid for 1 year and must be renewed every year on the date of issuance. Again, they got rid of the cap of 7 years for associate licensees to get to the to get all your hours in. I'm sorry, my PowerPoint just fast forwarded on me, so I'm desperately searching for the right slide. We'll fix this in post. Let's see here. All right, give me 1 second. Okay, so we got that. Okay. So the licensing period, you have to get your hours in for each credential. When we say hours, it's supervised work experience under a social worker or a licensed mental health professional, depending on the level that you're going for. You have to complete that required hours of employment, approved supervision, and continuing education requirements to apply for full licensure. That allows you to go forward and take the exam. So again, those changes, there's no longer a maximum 7-year period. The hours requirement, when we say hours, that's employment experience. The required hours for the LASW or licensed advanced social worker would be 3,000 hours, with 800 of those hours in direct client contact. The Department of Health has previously advised that for the purposes of documenting direct client contact, it would be in advanced social work. Client can be at the micro, meso, or macro levels. Approved clinical supervision, which we'll talk a little bit more about what clinical supervision is. You need 90 hours for the LASW, and continuing education, you need 36 hours with at least 6 hours in law and ethics. So it used to be 3,200 hours. It's been taken down to 3,000 hours total. For the LICSW, the required hours would include 3,000 hours. Again, that's down from 4,000 hours, with 1,000 hours in direct client services and under the supervision of an LICSW. That's different for this profession. You need to have those 1,000 hours. You have to have a supervisor identified that is an LICSW. It doesn't have to be just one supervisor. It could be multiple supervisors. Approved clinical supervision, you need 100 hours with 70-30 split, 70 hours with an LICSW, and the remainder of 30 hours could be under a mental health practitioner outlined in statute. Continuing education, in that you need 36 hours, 6 hours in law and ethics, and you need this within at least a 2-year period, at the very least. So, moving forward, once you have the hours or on the way to get the hours under after 2 years, you can go for the exam, and the exam is a requirement. So you have the education, you get your degree from a CSWE accredited institution, that is, you get your MSW. Then you earn your hours. That's your experience. And finally, there's an exam. So education, experience, exam. The exam requirements for the LASW is passing score on the ASWB Advanced Generalist level examination. ASWB, you can find out more about the exams at aswb.org. For the LICSW, you need a passing score on the ASWB's clinical level exam. Just a quick note is you only need to pass the exam for your level of licensure once. So if you pass the clinical exam, say in Washington, and move to another state, you don't have to take the exam again. You can take the exam multiple times. You do have different resources available to you through ASWB, but also through the association, including license prep courses and that sort of thing. In later slides, I'll talk about some different options that are being discussed for the future about exams. So that said, the flow or chain of events towards licensure, again, education, experience, exam, CSWA accredited master's or doctorate, social work degree, two, an application for one of the two associate credentials, accruing the minimum hours of supervised employment, supervision, and continuing education over a period of not fewer than 2 years. And again, I didn't catch this, and not more than 7 years. That's taken out. Never mind. So you can just make sure it's not less than 2 years is needed for full licensure. DOH application for full licensure for an LASW or LICSW, and then approval from DOH to take the relevant ASWB exam. Again, it says approval from DOH. It's just DOH needs to communicate to the test the owner of the test, that is the Association of Social Work Boards. They need to know that that you're, one, a licensure applicant, but two, that they know you're going to show up asking to take the exam. That would be the approval there. And then you need, once you have a passing score on the ASWB exam, that would equal full licensure. Again, just a note on supervision. Approved supervision is outlined in the rules. That's the Washington Administrative Code, or WAC, 246-809-334. Prior to commencement of any supervision, the supervisor must provide the licensee candidate a declaration form stating that they have met the requirements of WAC 246-809-334, and that they qualify as an approved supervisor. So the declaration kind of includes a couple of things. One, it attests as an approved supervisor, they're attesting that they've completed the following: a minimum of 15 clock hours in training and clinical supervision obtained through a supervision course. So it's a long 15-hour course, or continuing education credits on supervision, supervision of supervision, or any combination of these. Also, they need to have 25 hours of experience in supervision of clinical practice and have 2 years of clinical experience post-license. So that said, that declaration form goes on to say, I attest I'll gain that you'll gain a thorough knowledge of the supervisee's practice activities, including practice setting, record keeping as outlined in the rules, financial management, ethics of clinical practice, and a backup plan for coverage. So to make sure that clients are taken care of. That's to be completed by the supervisor and provided to the licensure candidate prior to the commencement of any supervised work. Again, in your employment settings that you're seeking, when you graduate and you're seeking a job, finding out if they have folks that are qualified to supervise you and willing to sign off on the attestation form is an important thing to know if you're seeking licensure as an end goal. So remember to ask that when you're looking for jobs if they offer clinical supervision. Continuing education, it was mentioned a couple of times that you need to have professional continuing education. Um, Continuing education after you graduate basically is workshops, conferences, learning institutes, things like that, that improve your knowledge and improve your professional discretion as you move through your professional career. Again, if you go to the dentist's office, you have a dentist that graduated in, say, 1981, you'd want to make sure that they had continuing education to keep up with hopefully advances in technology, pain management, et cetera. No different for social workers. We want to make sure that you have the toolbox as social workers that's modern and relevant and hopefully empirically based that you can help your clients. So Washington law currently requires all licensed social workers, including associates, to receive and document continuing education. That's 18 hours per year is the minimum for associates to have in order to renew your license annually. Every other year, 6 CE hours in professional law and ethics is required. So you'd want to keep track of that and make sure that when you're looking for workshops, looking for continuing education experiences, that you have it documented somehow that you attended. When we say 18 hours, that's 18 clock hours of continuing education. So it's measured in time. 60 minutes is 1 clock hour. Associates must have received these hours after completing the academic requirements. So you can't bank all of your continuing education before you graduate. It's postgraduate continuing education. And so acceptable CE courses include distance learning. That's a fancy word for virtual workshops, seminars, conferences, postgraduate institutes all count. Just make sure they have a continuing education certificate that documents where you took the course, what the time, the number of clock hours, a place to follow up for the Department of Health to audit if they need to, or audit's a fancy word for checking up. Um, Also, in continuing education, since 2014, all licensed social workers, including associates, need to complete a Department of Health approved training program in suicide assessment, treatment, and management. Recent social work grads can delay completion of their first training required for 6 years if you've already taken an approved course no more than 6 years prior to the application. So if you took a suicide assessment and treatment work class in school, that would count towards that requirement, especially with the University of Washington kind of being the hub for a lot of suicide prevention training. So if you wait too long, though, you'd have to take it again. Also in Washington, you have to do a telehealth training prior to engaging in telehealth. And telehealth is doing remote work either telephonically, audio only, or through audio-visual means. So like Zoom and other platforms, hopefully HIPAA compliant platforms. Health equity education is now also required. You need 2 CE hours. So keeping track of your continuing education, making sure that you're meeting these requirements as you go on. There's a lot of remote options, and you're able to do almost everything remotely nowadays. So actually 100% of your continuing education can be done remotely, and your supervision can also be done remotely. I'll outline here too. You'd want to read through the Department of Health website. They have a whole section on licensing for social workers, also for substance use disorder professionals, etc. They also have a really extensive frequently asked questions list. The Department of Health is also committed to creating more graphically pleasing and informative parts of their website to outline the path towards licensure. So expect that in the future. But part of that frequently asked questions list that they came up with is from folks like you that are looking to become licensed, asking their call center, or asking their staff questions over and over again, that they create these lists that they can kind of address those as they come up. The Association of Social Work Boards. That's the place that that's the authors of the social work licensing exams. And so they have the bachelor's level exams, the master's level exams for generalist social work, and then also for clinical social work. Though those are all housed at aswb.org. You can also look through their licensing law database and see how the rules and statutes are different from state to state. Then you have NASW, Washington chapter, our website. If you go to this website, it's the shorter one, nasw-wa.org. That takes you to our true website, and I'll show you that shortly. NASW's main website, that's the National Association's website, is socialworkers.org. If you go to our website, it's naswwa.socialworkers.org, and that'll, like I said, it redirects for the next couple of years. A couple of disclaimers here is one, this is informational only. I'm not a lawyer, and I do not work for the Department of Health, so this is informational only, and it's not legal advice. These rules and laws change pretty frequently. So DOH is the authority. NASW is not the regulatory authority. So if you have questions about licensing and you're moving in from another state, for example, we can point you in the right direction. But what we can't do is say, oh no, we can't take a specialized situation and answer it definitively in some cases. For typical licensing pathways, that is graduating from a Washington University and moving through the licensing process, we always refer to the rules and statutes. Okay, so just kind of talking about question and answer, I wanted to talk about the rules and laws changes. One is there's other categories of licensure, including the substance use disorder professional. Some of you might be already substance use disorder professionals. You can use that as an adjunct to your social work license or vice versa. Also, if you're employed in an agency, you've likely heard of an agency affiliated counselor. There's three levels of that. There's registered, certified, and licensed. And so those were just stood up this past couple of years to create different pathways for licensed behavioral health professionals to operate in agencies. Beginning in January 2021, healthcare professionals, excluding physicians, need to take that telemedicine training. So before you ever engage in telehealth, make sure to take that training. It is on the Department of Health's website as well. And just a couple of acknowledgments before we get into the update section. This presentation was adapted from the Path to Social Work Licensure in Washington State. That was originally written by Jonathan Beard with Progressive Strategies. And we have a handout that was authored by Serene Miller that will get to the school and show you the updated pathway. So that said, I have just a few more slides if you're okay with that, Claudia and Ryan. Okay. So a couple of updates. You're, as you're working, if you're in an internship situation currently or a practicum placement, just know that there used to be limits on distance supervision. That is, only a certain amount of supervision could be done via telehealth. Those were eliminated with House Bill 1007 in 2021. So there is no longer a limit on distance supervision. Limits on distance education was 26 hours per reporting period, and that permanent rule change actually did happen. And so you can get all of your continuing education online if you chose to do so. Other changes related to 1724 and 2247, as well as 1939, I'll get into in the next couple of slides. So last year, 2024, uh, House Bill 1939, known as the Social Work Licensure Compact, was passed. NASW secured a sponsor after a lot of preliminary work funded by the Department of Defense. The Council of State Governments stood up a group of stakeholders to look at what is preventing. There was the reason why the Department of Defense was involved was because the retention and recruitment of folks to stay in the military. They found that a lot of professionals would opt to not renew their contracts with the military if they were in a professional setting because of the complex licensing rules from state to state, or their spouse or partner's licensing rules. So what the Department of Defense did was funded the Council of State Governments to take a look at licensing laws and to create compacts for different professions that would help people to kind of get a permanent, more permanent license. That is, you'd have a license that would move with you if you maintained it in one place, your home state. You can then move with that license and practice over state borders without any problem, much like a driver's license. So currently, a licensed social worker needs to maintain a license in every state that they practice in. The compact creates a pathway for multi-state licensure. That is, you get your license in your home state, you apply for an interstate compact license, and then you can practice in any state that's part of this compact. A compact's an agreement between states to do something. Currently, I think it's about 23 states have passed the licensure compact. Our hope is that all 50 states would pass the licensure compact. So if you get licensed in one state, you can practice using telehealth or driving to other states to see clients. You have to be licensed in the state that your client is physically located in, not residing in, but physically located in, so you don't break the laws and rules of the state that's regulating social work practice. So that said, that was a big accomplishment. We were the fourth state to pass that, and the Compact Commission that was set up by the compact legislation is currently looking at issuing licenses by 2026. So we're very hopeful that they'll get through that work. Another bill that passed in 2023, the year before, was 1724. And 1724 was a bill that sought to decrease barriers in behavioral health professions. And what that bill did was reduce the number of experience hours needed for licensure from 4,000 to 3,000 in the LICSW category. It reduced the number of supervised hours for LICSWs from 130 to 100. It also authorized a supervisor directory maintained by the Department of Health and created a stipend program. Originally, the stipend program was designed to cover out-of-pocket supervision expenses for associates, that is, people seeking licensure. That changed with the next bill we'll talk about to be a smaller universe of folks applying for that stipend would be supervisors versus all those licensees. The bill also created credentials for the agency affiliated counselors, that is registered, certified, and licensed. It also charges the Department of Health to report on legislative suggestions to eliminate barriers to licensure. So over the last half of 2023 and most of 24, there were different work groups looking at alternatives to exams, supervision changes, and listening sessions about what the licensed professions wanted to see. So last year, the engrossed second substitute House Bill 2247 was a continuation bill from Representative Bateman that also looked to decrease barriers to behavioral health professions. created a stipend program for supervisors to apply for supervising associates. So it changed that stipend program from associates applying for funds to supervisors being able to apply for funds because it's a smaller universe of folks to manage. It also eliminates the 7-year associate renewal limit. And it also provides a pathway for expired licensees, those folks that had exceeded the 7-year renewal limits that basically lost their ability to be licensed. They can now reapply for licensure, and you can keep the associate license for as long as you need to. Also with associate level, there's an associate level that was created for psychologists. Psychologists, as you know, need a PhD to practice. Now there's a master's level psychologist credential for those folks that are working towards their full credential or PhD. Also, it allows associate billing. So those folks that are working under supervision, there's a pathway for them to actually be billable under insurance. It also removes the continuing education requirements in law and moves them to the rules. That's something for you all as future licensed social workers to know that if you don't see it in the law, you need to look in the rules, but continuing education requirements are important. The move from law to rule allows the Department of Health Secretary to make decisions about what the amount of continuing education is needed, talking with the advisory committee currently. It also allows associate licensees that are applicants for associate licenses to practice for 120 days under supervision while they're waiting for their application to be approved or denied. That's a big change because the wait time for applications with the Department of Health was increasing as more people moved to the state. There was longer wait times. So this allows a good faith effort for folks to practice under supervision while they're waiting for a decision to be made. That's beginning October 1st of 2025. I think that that kind of pushes the Department of Health to make sure they're reviewing the applications a bit faster and also using the tools that were authorized like Helms and other things like that to get through the application queues. Rule changes forthcoming. All those laws that are passed need rules to implement the changes. So there's supervision standards that are under review right now, the licensed counselor supervisor directory and the directory applications for that and the folks that work in agencies are all under review right now under emergency rules. Practicing with a pending license, that 120 days that I just spoke about, that's a pending rule right now, as well as the supervisor stipend program. Just know that if you go to the Department of Health's website, which I'll show you in a second, you want to subscribe to their Gov delivery system, which would inform you about all the different things that are happening in government, especially around those things that you care about, like social work licensure and things like that. So, future legislation, things to watch out for is NASW and other associations will likely look at addressing exams. If you have not heard, the Association of Social Work Boards released data in 2022, 2023 that showed there was disparities in pass rates for test taking applicants. It showed demonstrated that there is likely some bias in the exams. There's some different pass rates for demographic groups. So Black women passed at lower rates on the first try, for example. Men passed at lower rates on the first try, as did older folks that were taking the exam for the first time. So they're looking at alternatives, which would include enhanced supervision that would be signed off and show that you have professional discretion. That more to come on that. That hasn't been moved forward quite yet here in Washington. There's also consideration of a standalone social work board. Currently, we don't have a standalone social work board. It's three professions, counseling, marriage and family therapy, and social work are all under an advisory board that advises the Department of Health Secretary on laws, rules, and disciplinary matters. If we had our own board, which would be great, it would be social workers governing social workers instead of a Department of Health Secretary. We have a great secretary, but we don't know what the secretary will look like in the future. So we want to make sure that social workers are able to kind of have the reins of their profession, much like psychologists have their own licensing board run by psychologists. There will also be clarification of LASW supervision and past law changes. There was a change where the licensed advanced social worker would need a major portion of their hours to be supervised by a social worker. Somehow that got taken out. So we want to make sure that we retain the flavor of social work for the professional social worker that's going to be licensed. So more to come in the future. Um, just know before I show you the slides, of course, you're invited to join NASW. That's the largest professional association for social workers in the country, but also in Washington State. You get discounts on continuing education and training, as well as local and national resources like conferences and events, in addition to liability insurance and more. Exclusive reduced membership fees for students. You can take advantage of that while you're a student. So the day before you graduate, you can join at $60. And then it goes up every year, it goes up just a little bit and then tops out at the 236 regular rate. So just know that if you have questions, concerns, or complaints, you can reach me at my email address here or our website, jarp.naswwa@socialworkers.org, or you can go to our website at naswwa.socialworkers.org. And finally, let me do this. I'm going to see about stopping the PowerPoint and show you all these exciting things. This is our website. Again, if you go to nasw-wa.org, it redirects to this website. This is our chapter's website. It is Social Work Month, so we will have a Social Work Month celebration coming up here on Friday, March 28th to honor our award winners from around the state. If you go through here, you can also look at the advocacy link, and it will take you to eventually you'll get to the voter voice page, which shows you those legislative affairs type things that we're working on. We have a legislative action committee that is very active. They meet at least once a month and talk about different laws and sometimes are briefed on rule changes. But mostly come up with our policy conference event that happens in February. If you missed it, it's recorded, so you can click this link and you'll see that the recording's linked there. But we have a very active legislative action committee as well as a board of directors and membership engagement committee, et cetera. So to go to the Department of Health's website, let me see if I found it. The Department of Health has a website. It's doh.wa.gov. But if you go to DOH Social Workers, it'll take you right there. So this is the rules and laws. You just click here under laws, and it shows you where the RCWs and WACs are. It also has a really extensive frequently asked questions page right above that. And this is telling you about the difference between an LASW and an LICSW and the different tracks for each, and also goes into actually applying for your credential using the DOH system in their application forms. So that said, I would be happy to show you this here real quick. This is the really exciting CR 102. That's the emergency rules that I was pointing out earlier for all those different sections. So if you go down here, it shows all the new sections of rules that would be outlined for the supervision standards, et cetera. So that said, it looks like there's 30 comments in there. I don't know if that's 30 questions.
No, don't worry. It's not 30
Oh,
questions.
good.
But I have 5 questions in the chat. So I will start with those. And then if anybody has a question that is not in the chat and want to ask directly, I will have an opportunity for that as well. So the first question